Welcome to the Liminal Witch Podcast, a space for those who walk the edges, dance in the thresholds, and find magic in the spaces between. I'm Summer Star. I'm a liminal witch, a ritual goods crafter, and I'm an intuitive reader here in Salem, Massachusetts. If you've ever felt like your practice doesn't fit neatly into one category or tradition, or if you feel pulled to the provocative edges of the unknown, then this podcast is meant for you. This first episode, episode 0 we're going to call it, is really just a space for me to introduce myself, talk about the point of the podcast, and go over what you can expect to find here. It's my very first time podcasting, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of room for improvement and a bit of a learning curve, so just hang with me, and I really appreciate that you're here. So jumping in, liminality, which we'll definitely dive into in many future episodes, but it's kind of that threshold or that space that houses the energy of transition. So it's where something is neither fully here or there. It's a passage from one state to another. Those spaces in between, spaces where you probably feel a pull towards something deeper, maybe something older and ancient. There's often this intense hum of energy that's just sitting right on the edge of perception. So you can almost grasp it, but you feel it more than see it. You can imagine it as, a long hallway where you're in this space, you're traveling from one point to another, and you can pick any door that you want to go through. But until you've stepped through that door and gone through that threshold, you're kind of in this in-between state. And that's sort of the feeling of liminality. It's this path between here and there. In this podcast, we're going to dig into those spaces while also exploring topics like chthonic magic, animism, shadow work, underworld currents, and witchcraft that exists kind of beyond the mainstream. This is not a space for gatekeeping. There's not going to be any rigid dogma. Again, probably some awkward moments as I learn how to communicate and record my thoughts. But, this is probably going to be just pretty raw and real as I offer some musings about the craft, about spirits, energies, demons, products that I make, and, all the ways that we make magic in a world that really kind of constantly shifts beneath us. Okay, so digging into who I am. I own a business here in Salem, Massachusetts called Chthonic Star. You can also pronounce it Chthonic Star. It's primarily an online ritual goods business, but I also have what I've named a liminal parlor here in Salem, where I do intuitive readings by appointment. I'll make sure there's a link in my information. If you happen to be in Salem, I'd love to have you in. I also handcraft eco-conscious ritual goods. The products I use, the ingredients I use, I make sure they're as eco-friendly as possible. Any of my candles, I use 100% beeswax. Any of the dyes and paints I use, they're all non-toxic and plant-based. A lot of that is really tied to my educational and professional background, which was in conservation biology and environmental policy, and I had a job in clean energy for quite a while. And, those are sort of my past life that also inform my business decisions. So I'm very happy for that and my relation to products and materials. I've always felt this calling to do something more. I've always been in awe of liminal spaces, and I've really developed my craft around how to sort of access and work with those spaces. So caves, oceans, portals or doorways, dense fog, and really long and quiet hallways, steps descending into darkness, and really deep forests. It's, those primal feeling in between places where you can just feel how thick the air and the energy is, and you almost hear this hum of what lies just beyond those thresholds, those liminal spaces. That's where I really tap into the power of my magic, and a lot of my practice is really based on transformation for myself, but also, helping my clients as well with that and how to move through things in their lives and their magical practices. And again, regarding my magical practice, I've never really fit neatly into one path. I really found my footing in underworld currents. I have a very strong animistic practice because of my childhood. There's a lot of Native American inspiration and traditions because of my biological father, as well as how I was raised early in my childhood. And I've done a lot of shadow work that really demands transformation rather than comfort. And not that all witchcraft is comfortable. It's just that's why I've been drawn to these liminal practices and these other paths. Through all of that, I kind of realized that there are a lot of others like me. People don't really fit into this mold of mainstream witchcraft. They don't necessarily fully identify with a singular folk tradition or all Wiccan perspectives or hierarchies that come with some of these traditions and practices. Other people who really wanted something deeper, older, and something that didn't come with a rule book. And they kind of be very open in how they approach their practice and have sort of a multifaceted, multi-pantheon, multi-inspired craft and figure out what that means for them as individuals. All of this is why I feel really inspired to create my first podcast. It's an experiment for me, a conversation with you, this sort of living thing that's going to evolve as we go. It offers me a space beyond standard social media where I don't have to be restricted to 10-second attention spans and sound bits, and I can present my musings in this liminal space, which is what this is as well. The space that kind of sits between silence and sound and travels without acknowledgement until somebody steps into its presence. So my listeners can enter into a space that's separate from their surroundings, really experience that threshold between presence and immersion. I just find that extremely cool, and I'm really excited to be doing this. Getting a little deeper into what you can expect from me, some episodes are going to be deep dives from my perspective. I'm going to try to do daily shorts as well, or at least 5 days a week shorts. I don't know if it'll be 7 days, but we'll start aiming for 5. I'll dive into topics like what it means to be a liminal witch. That'll be the topic for episode 1. Working with chthonic magic and spirits of the underworld, animism, and how to connect with the living world around you, especially in these modern times. Intuitive magic, building your craft and being confident in your practice if you're somebody who doesn't align with rigid structures. Shadow work, self-transformation, and why magic really demands evolution and growth. Some episodes will be personal musings, some will be educational, some might just be me rambling about strange experiences I had in the woods because, let's be honest, magic's weird and that's part of the fun. I'll share my honest insights, personal perspectives, but I'm, absolutely not an expert or a renowned occult scholar. I don't have all the answers, and personally, I honestly never trust people that say they do. But I know that magic is meant to be lived, it's meant to be experienced, questioned, and redefined over and over again. Just because one method or perspective is someone else's truth, that doesn't mean it has to be yours. So I invite you to join me on this journey, and remember, you're always free to disagree with me. My perspectives are only meant to inspire your own line of thinking and encourage growth in your personal power and practice. The path of a liminal witch is one of constant transformation, so learning, unlearning, and stepping into the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. This podcast is just the beginning of that journey. It's an exciting new liminal space for me, and I can't wait to explore it with you. If this speaks to you, please stick around, subscribe, share episodes with someone who needs to hear them. If you want to find me outside of this podcast, you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. On all of those, it's just at Chthonic Star. I also host a Patreon community designed as an interactive space to dive into these topics and more. Finally, I, of course, highly encourage you to sign up for my email list, and I'll add links to all of this in my episode description as well as my bio. Thank you for listening. Until next time, embrace the thresholds, trust the in-between, and remember, your magic is always yours to define.